Leo the Lions, like now I go by the lineup. And if you can't make your mind up, I know you know where to find us. So don't go by blind luck, you should probably subscribe. Click play, kick back, chill, and watch it all.
And welcome. I'm back at it again. It's Leo the lineup. Thank you for returning. One day I will possess enough processing power in my computer to run that intro without it fucking skipping. Super frustrating. Hopefully there's no audio lag in this video, but nonetheless, this is an NFL video. We got a Christmas game involving my Minnesota Vikings taking on the New Orleans Saints in an afternoon matchup on Christmas Day. You know you got the NBA slate, however, we are blessed with an NFL football game too. Sorry to bring it up, Saints fans, but these two teams are super familiar with one another, whether it was the Minneapolis Miracle 2 years ago or last year with the Vikings knocking the Saints out of the playoffs yet again. Always been great games, super competitive, super exciting, so it should make for some good football on Christmas Day. Nonetheless, let's just get right into it. You will see Dalvin Cook at the top. Obviously, he's going to be the most expensive player, and for good reason. He has the highest fantasy points per week average on the slate. If you take a look at this guy's game log, you will see he is the third Super Smash Bro. Whether it's 30-point games, 40-point games, 50-point games, the guy gets it done. However, he is in a tougher matchup against the Saints defense. It's a little bit more stingy than what he's been used to. I'm definitely going to get to Dalvin Cook, but not necessarily prioritize him as the MVP or captain on DraftKings. MVP for sure on Fanduel, but not the captain on DraftKings, because that increased salary once you put him in captain makes it kind of hard to fill out that roster and makes it for slim pickings for the rest of the way. But that takes me into Alvin Kamara. This is a guy that I like as a discount to Dalvin Cook. Obviously, he was slowed down a little bit from his prior weeks when Taysom Hill took over. Seemed like the targets kind of disappeared. Got a little bit better that last game that Taysom Hill started. However, you were assuming last week it would be higher than 6 targets. They had no Mike Thomas and they had Drew Brees come back. I was expecting double digits. Not really taking that into much consideration in this matchup against the Vikings. It is a weaker defense, unfortunately, for my fandom. A weaker defense. I do expect Drew Brees to kind of riddle him with more targets as usual, and as they did in the beginning of the year when he was averaging nearly double digits, especially with Michael Thomas and a couple other people questionable. Last week could have been an outlier with Drew Brees returning. Seemed like every pass catcher got 4 to 5 targets. Kamara got 6. He definitely spread it around, Drew Brees. He spread it around. I believe he only completed 15 passes out of 31 attempts, so not super efficient, but I expect that to change this Friday against the Minnesota Vikings and look for Alvin Kamara to get back to his normal workload and probably, unfortunately for me, smash. Leading me into the quarterback, Drew Brees, who apparently has more rib issues than a Kansas City barbecue when the smoker is broken. Speaking of Kansas City, that's who he returned against. Completed only 15 passes of his 34 attempts, so only 44% completions. Not great, not efficient. Did get 3 touchdowns, however, 2 were to running backs, 1 going to Kamara, 1 going to Latavius Murray, so kind of confusing. He does have some cheap wide receiver options with Mike Thomas on the IR. You obviously are going to have Emmanuel Sanders. However, Marquez Callaway, I believe, is coming back from the IR, and I believe he is damn near minimum price at $300. Like I said, figures to start against the Vikings, $300. He's going to be a lock at that price. He's going to be an extension and a bridge to a more expensive build if you want to go Dalvin Cook or Kamara at captain. Obviously, Callaway, he's going to be a starting wide receiver probably at $300. Looks amazing with Drew Brees, and that's how I'm going to sell Drew Brees, so that sums up Drew Brees. Taking me into Kirk Cousins, who's kind of going as an under-the-radar, cheaper captain option, in my opinion, on DraftKings, because if you look at the output, he actually does get it done fantasy points-wise, whether you hate the guy or not, or just love to hate on him. In a matchup where the Vikings could see themselves trailing and trying to catch up, him and Justin Jefferson look awesome. Justin Jefferson has just been riddled with targets the last couple of weeks. Surprisingly, Adam Thielen is coming off 3 and 4 target weeks back to back. So he's certainly favoring Jefferson if you're going Kirk as the captain, or Kirk in general, maybe Jefferson as captain. It certainly appears that Jefferson is the go-to guy. However, Thielen might be contrarian and a little leverage on that. Nonetheless, Kirk Cousins is surprisingly producing your mental expectations when you think of the guy, because I know a lot of people love to hate him. However, he has been getting it done and is certainly a viable option in a game where they could be trailing and throwing. Leading me into the aforementioned go-to man, Justin Jefferson. What can I say? This kid's phenomenal. Nearly 1,200 yards on the season. Targets are there, 13, 12, 8, 11. The kid is a monster, making some ridiculous catches. If it's not Justin Herbert, it's got to be Justin Jefferson, his Rookie of the Year. I mean, he's a Pro Bowler as a rookie. Look at this output, ridiculous for a rookie, like I said. And he's at a value compared to all these other guys at the top. Justin Jefferson, riddled with targets in a game script where the Vikings are probably going to have to throw more than usual. Definitely like Justin Jefferson. And to further validate why I like Justin Jefferson, if you will notice the salaries on DraftKings, $9,200 for Justin Jefferson, and the #1 wide receiver, Emmanuel Sanders for the Saints, only $400 cheaper at $88. The output is, look at that, 48, 504. I know he's been hurt and not always been the #1 receiver, but I mean, for $400 difference, look at the stats. I mean, come on, it's not even close. However, Emmanuel Sanders, like I said, Michael Thomas on the IR, going to be the #1 wide receiver. However, last week, in a week where Drew Brees seemingly threw the ball to everybody 5 to 6 times, 5 targets, nothing special, nothing that's going to blow you away. Not necessarily looking to force myself to Emmanuel Sanders at that price tag. However, he obviously is going to be in play as the #1 wide receiver. There is fear that Kamara will go back to double-digit targets. And like I alluded to earlier with Marquez Callaway coming back for $300, the #2 wide receiver for $300, or do you want the #1 wide receiver for 5 targets and $8,800 price tag? Not really close of a debate unless Emmanuel Sanders has a blowout game. Not a priority for me. Going to have a little bit, obviously, just because you have to as the wide receiver 1 against a weaker pass defense, but certainly cheaper pass catching options elsewhere for the Saints. And to further explain why I'm not the biggest Emmanuel Sanders fan at that price is because you got Adam Thielen. I mean, $200 cheaper than Emmanuel Sanders. I know he's coming off 2 slower weeks with 3 targets and 4 targets, but look at targets sporadically have been known to jump off. He does have 13 receiving touchdowns, which is actually kind of ridiculous. The fantasy output has been much better than Emmanuel Sanders all year, even though Emmanuel Sanders has been injured and has taken a back seat to Michael Thomas when Michael Thomas has come back. Nonetheless, the output with Thielen is certainly much better, even as an average per week, than Emmanuel Sanders. Just using Adam Thielen as a point of reference as to why I think Emmanuel Sanders is a bit overpriced, even as the #1 option for the New Orleans Saints as wide receivers go, even though Kamara is probably going to be the more targeted guy. Adam Thielen cheaper than Emmanuel Sanders by $200. Game script where the Vikings probably have to throw against a tougher defense. However, he's probably going to be the lesser-owned Vikings wide receiver. Certainly got to like Adam Thielen as a contrarian play to Justin Jefferson. Then you got Michael Thomas, who is on the IR, and he is not going to be coming back anytime soon, which leads me to Traquan Smith, who is questionable himself. He did not practice Wednesday, which isn't a great sign for him playing in the game on Friday, which is also reason why I keep mentioning this guy at $300 coming off the IR himself. Figures to be elevated to the #2 wide receiver with Traquan Smith in doubt. Certainly got to keep your eyes on him, make sure he's going to be out for sure. But nonetheless, Marquez Callaway should be a lock because of Traquan Smith possibly missing. Taking me into Taysom Hill, who's priced as the backup quarterback actually, and not as a tight end like earlier in the year. So he's going to get the backup quarterback price of DK of $6,000. Makes him harder to get to because it's kind of expensive for his role. They seemingly still want to involve him in the offense, still going to get goal line work. I mean, look at, he had a rushing touchdown last week with Drew Brees back. However, as a gadget type player, $6K is just too expensive for me, so I'm not going to probably pay up for Taysom Hill. However, it is going to be probably contrarian, and wouldn't be surprised if he got 2 carries for 2 touchdowns. So no for me, but gamble if you wanna on Taysom Hill. Next on the list, Jared Cook. Kind of a mid-price tight end. Last week, like I said, Drew Brees threw the ball to everybody pretty much about 5 to 6 times. In my opinion, I was expecting more of Jared Cook this season. Kind of took a step back. Does have 6 touchdowns. Tight ends are always going to be red zone viable and a red zone threat. So feel free to get yourself some exposure to Jared Cook. I mean, he certainly is a better option, in my opinion, than paying up nearly $3,000 for Emmanuel Sanders, or a little bit more than $3,000 actually for Emmanuel Sanders. So I would definitely go the Jared Cook route over Emmanuel Sanders, and then kind of get Marquez Callaway in the mix as well as far as a wide receiver. That's the way I'm going to factor in Jared Cook. This takes me to the Minnesota Vikings tight end situation. Kyle Rudolph just got ruled out for Friday's game against New Orleans, so now we have either Irv Smith Jr. or Tyler Conklin. My pivot to Irv Smith is Tyler Conklin. He has had a couple good weeks while Rudolph has been out. Irv Smith has been playing the last couple weeks, banged up himself, entering the matchups the last couple weeks with questionable tags. However, being a Minnesota Vikings fan, watching the games every single weekend, I know they have an admiration for Irv Smith. They try to implement him into the offense. They do try to get him the ball. During the trading deadline, they did shop Kyle Rudolph. However, all the teams in response were asking about Irv Smith, and I know that the Vikings kept turning that down. So that shows you how much they love the guy. Certainly in play at 5,200, a nice double stack with Kirk and either Thielen or Jefferson. However, with Irv Smith, that's going to lead me into real quick Tyler Conklin. I believe he is right there. And if you take a look at him, surprisingly, he has done pretty well the last 2 weeks, scoring a touchdown last week. Certainly playable at 3,000 with Kyle Rudolph out. That's going to elevate his value. Certainly underpriced. Hopefully a nice pivot to what I'm anticipating is a higher owned Irv Smith. Both tight ends are in play, certainly, both at great prices, both probably better plays than kickers, I would say, in my opinion. Nonetheless, that's going to wrap up the tight end situation for the Minnesota Vikings. There is value, both players. Leading me into a former Viking himself, Latavius Murray, coming in at $4,800. It's a little bit more of an expensive price tag for a backup running back role. However, they do try to implement him in the offense. Gave him 4 carries, 6 targets. Somehow caught a touchdown pass from Drew Brees last week. A little bit too pricey for me. However, there have been weeks where Latavius Murray gets a few more carries than anticipated, and he's always going to be a touchdown vulture type player. Kind of dicey with Taysom Hill also trying to be a vulture himself. Kind of sucks for Alvin Kamara ownership, but Latavius Murray nonetheless could be a different type of build play for you for sure at that price. Taking me to the Saints, who I might have to admit a little bit that they are in play slightly. I'm not leaning towards them or making them a priority by any means. However, we have seen Kirk Cousins just get off to terrible boneheaded starts for some reason in a couple of these games this year. Always going to make them live for a defensive touchdown, interception, a fumble, couple turnovers, knock on wood for my Minnesota Vikings fans, and that's not what I'm hoping for. However, that's why you would play the Saints. I'm not making them a priority, but I can see why you would like them. A quick gloss over kickers. You know, it's always random and redundant. If it's going to be a surprisingly lower scoring game than usual, then the kickers should factor into the scoring. However, these are usually 28 to 30 type point games between these two teams, so I'm not really going to get there with kickers. Plus Dan Bailey and this new guy that the Vikings signed. Not even sure who's going to be kicking. So as far as kickers, take your pick. Kind of random for me, and I don't like giving advice on them. Leading me to hopefully the pivot off Irv Smith Jr. at the tight end position with Kyle Rudolph out. This guy was known as generally a blocker and not really a receiving tight end. However, watching the games every week in the last 2 weeks, specifically with Rudolph out, surprisingly athletic, made a big play last week, scored a touchdown, almost got you 15 fantasy points. I mean, the last 2 weeks, that point output is going to surpass kickers in my opinion, especially for a cheaper price, $3K. Hopefully lower ownership and not many people are on to him. Kind of hard to tell being in the market and being an insider and not an outsider and looking at it from an outsider's point of view. However, I am going to play Tyler Conklin a little bit more than Irv Smith. However, I do like both tight end value options as a stack with Kirk Cousins and one of the wide receivers. bringing me to more random Saints wide receivers. I'm just going to go through them real quick. 4 targets last week for Juwan Johnson. Seems to still be on the roster. Humphrey apparently was put back on the practice squad. I'm assuming that's for Marquez Callaway. But yeah, cheap Saints wide receivers, take your pick. 1 target last week. Figures to not be much of a factor. Marquez Callaway, $300. Just lock this guy in, especially if Traquan Smith is out. Going to be number 2 wide receiver at $300. That's just a plug and play, a free square. And yeah, pretty much just going to wrap up my video as far as this goes. This Friday slate that we have between the Minnesota Vikings and New Orleans Saints figures to be a pretty competitive game regardless of records. Vikings always play the Saints tough, have came away with the win twice. However, should be a pretty close competitive game with shootout vibes certainly in play with the Vikings' weaker defense and the Vikings' strong offense as well. But nonetheless, that's probably going to wrap up this showdown video for the Minnesota Vikings and New Orleans Saints. Christmas Day afternoon, I believe it's a 3:30 Central Time kickoff. If you like this video in any way, feel free to hit me with a like and show me. If you are new, feel free to subscribe. If you are returning, I salute you and your dedication. I appreciate your support. And until next time, guys, as always, peace out.